if they can survive DPMM and Terengganu in their league games, in addition to their FA Cup games where they are expected to comfortably coast the first leg against the second tier Malaysian university, then at least Kinoshi will be given more time to steady the ship and be able to make more improvements as the season goes on. But if those 4 banana skin matches produce all in all defeats, then Kinoshi's position will be more precarious leading into September. And who knows, by then Kinoshi may end up being the first managerial casualty of the 2025-26 Malaysian League season. In the second half of the 2024-25 season, Selangor FC head coach Kazuhito Kinoshi, who took office on 23rd of November last year, guided Selangor to a fantastic run of results as the Red Giants finished second place in the Malaysian Super League and won their first silverware in the decade as they lifted the Malaysian Football League Challenge Cup. And much was expected for the 60-year-old Japanese head coach as Selangor head into the upcoming 2025-26 season, looking to further consolidate their second place as the best of the rest in the Malaysian Super League and narrow the gap with current powerhouses Johor Darul Takzim. But yet, with days away from the start of the upcoming Malaysia Super League season, which begins with the Piala Subansing or Malaysia Community Shield, which sees Selangor take on their rivals Johor in the season opener on 8th of August at the Sultan Ibrahim Stadium, questions abound over Kazuhito Kinoshi's future at Selangor, which was rather strange, but yet it is swarming around in reality as Selangor have been struggling in the pre-season. So, in what was supposed to be his first full season in charge of the former giants of Malaysian club football, how did he suddenly find himself plunging into a constant struggle on the state of the first team squad, and perhaps, as far-fetched as it sounds, his own future in the hot seat just days before the new campaign is about to commence? Tanyaja attempts to find out how rapidly the Japanese has fallen from being the guy who helped Selangor win its first silverware in the decade to being the fall guy in the space of being potentially a fall guy and perhaps even the first coaching casualty of the upcoming season, even before a ball kicks off. In the past season, since he took charge in late November last year, Kinoshi has actually led Selangor to a good run of results after overcoming initial hiccups in the AFC Champions League 2, where they lost to Muang Thong United and failed to qualify for the next stage, and also saw themselves crashing out to eventual Malaysian Cup finalists Pahang at the first hurdle of the competition, a competition in which they remain the record holders of the most number of championships won in this competition. In spite of the early setbacks and admittedly having fallen on the wrong side of the Selangor fans early on, Kinoshi eventually steadied the ship and guided them to an impressive run of results. In the first half of 2015, before the end of last season, Kinoshi actually guided them in 12 competitive games, of which 9 of them ended in victories, 2 of them in draws, and only 1 loss, and that was actually on the 16th of March when they lost to Kuching City, which was coached by the eventual season's coach of the year, Aidil Sharif Sahak of Singapore. And with such a good run of results that saw them secure second place for second season in a row and also lift some silverware, however minor it was, hopes were high when Selangor recommenced for pre-season training last month or in late June, as they look forward to the upcoming campaign where once again they'll be competing in both domestic and continental fronts, especially when they are having a second crack at the ACL2, the second tier of Asian club competition. However, things began to get rather wobbly wrong during the past month when they first went for a lengthy overseas training camp in Thailand where they played 5 games, of which the first 2 games saw them take on Thai League 1, that means Thailand's top flight competition opponents, where they actually lost on the 9th of July to Ratchaburi 1-0, 0-1, and 2 days later to newly promoted club Chonburi 1-2. Then on the 14th of July, they recovered to defeat Bangkok FC, which is not the same club as Bangkok United, 3-1 on the closed door game. But the next day they suffered a rather embarrassing 1-1 draw with Kasetsat, which is a second tier club in Thailand, in a 1-1 draw. And they wrap up their Thailand tour on the 17th of July with a narrow 1-0 win over third tier club Burapha United. So all in, as much as the training camp saw mixed results, they were hoping that this is probably the phase where Kinoshi is getting the survivors from last season's team and the new signings and some of the newly promoted players from the Selangor under-23s to mold themselves, to get themselves ready as a cohesive outfit. Then came the final warm-up game on 27th of July where the Red Giants took on Asia Warriors, which is a motley crew of retired former Asian internationals who are now playing together for fun, enjoying themselves without the pressures of regular training or national team or club pressures. Among those players in the Asia Warriors squad included Japanese World Cupper Keisuke Honda, former Singapore international Baihaki Kaizan, Philippines international Stefan Schrock, who was one of the masterminds behind the Ascal's entry to the 2019 Asian Cup, and more. And with an opponent where all these players have retired, they are already above the age of 30, at least be above 33 and beyond, and having only trained together once in a while, very casually putting together. This was supposed to be the only home game of the pre-season series where Selangor was actually expected to flourish. But I think to the rude shock of the Selangor fans who attended that friendly match in the evening on the 27th of July at the Petaling Jaya Stadium, they saw Selangor struggle to grind out a goalless draw with the Asia Warriors. A result they did not expect, as pre-season training in Thailand was supposed to have been comprehensive, regardless of the results. But when the Red Giants led by Faisal Halim could not even put on a decent show against a group of retired footballers, where they were supposed to deliver a win to send a confidence boosting message ahead of the new season, something was really wrong. And how poor was Selangor when they took on that group of ex-internationals? They could not find any cohesion throughout the game. They struggled to set the tempo, to dictate the flow of the game. They struggled to coordinate themselves in the final third, despite making a number of forays into that area of the pitch. And from the highlights I saw, they really struggled to make shots. Faisal Halim and company were unable to get the decision making right. They were unable to push themselves, to stretch themselves against experienced players who are lacking in fitness but are not lacking in the smarts and the brains on playing the game on the pitch. And To make matters worse, Selangor could have fallen to an embarrassing defeat when Baihaki Kaizan, who is now spending more time in the office cubicle inside the Football Association of Singapore rather than on the pitch, saw his header crash against the crossbar of a free kick. It was like, hello, this is a defense that had been training full-time for at least a few weeks now. This was a team that was supposed to have gathered themselves. I mean, they would have experimented, they would have expected to find a certain kind of cohesion. But yet, in that set piece alone, it was quite glaring that, yes, Baihaki was very tall, but good defenders or good man markers would have been able to prevent Baihaki from trying to meet that free kick. But yet, they allowed him to rise above everybody else unmarked, which was not a good thing to see. With all respect to Baihaki, Schrock, Honda and company, was it because suddenly Selangor decided they wanted to give a lot of respect? I think that set worrying alarm bells among the Selangor fans, who, ironically, are actually more demanding from the team than Johor fans. I know, but Selangor fans have a tradition of being very demanding towards their club. And given that they had fallen so far from grace from the glory decades where they probably had expected to have fallen maybe 1 or 2 years, but would bounce back up again and be among the top teams, this whole stretch where Selangor struggled to gain some kind of cohesiveness with this new team ahead of the new season, and failing to even beat now ex-internationals but now part-timers, a group of veterans, is a very worrying sign. How worrying is it? It actually piled on a few rather damning information that I've mentioned before in the Thailand preseason game. Because Selangor are also going to compete in Asia, much was expected in how Selangor was expected to fare against the top flight teams in Thailand. But yet they fell to the only 2 top tier clubs they faced during the July training tour there. And they even struggled to hold the second division club to a draw, led by former Singapore League midfielder Sati Chayapua. That was how difficult Kinoshi's task blew up overnight. The patience was once again beginning to wear thin. And as much as results, as we all like to say, do not really mean much ahead of the new season or what actually happens during the season. But signs of a poor campaign ahead can also be foretold on how the players have been responding in preseason, how they had been performing in preseason, and also the results. Some results are more indicative than others. And a goalless draw in which they struggled, not because they had a lot of shots but failed to be a stubborn veterans team, but they were rather incohesive against a group of retired players. That said a lot about how Selangor were going to approach the new campaign ahead, and it does not make for good reading. So, to further compound matters, on the 3rd of August, Selangor head coach Kinoshi admitted in a media interview to the New Straits Times that not all of his players were showing the intensity that he expected and required from them in the training sessions and the matches. And from what it was quoted, this was actually what he said, as quoted here. Let me see. He actually remarked that some are still struggling to meet the standards required as the new league season loomed. Very bad news. Days away from facing Johor Darul Taksim, a team that Kinoshi has yet to meet as Selangor head coach. And already that pressure is piling up, and Kinoshi had now admitted that things were actually not going well in pre-season. So what gave? So I think based on that short article on the New Straits Times where he admitted that things were not going well. I think this was what Tanyaji would interpret on Kinoshi's expectations, given that Kinoshi has had extensive experience as an assistant coach, as a fitness coach in Japan, and prior to his Selangor appointment, part of the technical staff in the Serbia national team, serving as the assistant manager to Dragan Stojkovic, and was involved in the 2022 World Cup finals as part of that backroom staff. And from that vast experience, I think the Japanese was admitting this. The players definitely did not hit as what Tanyaji would interpret as high consistent training levels, high consistent training intensity, stronger mentality and professionalism on and off the pitch, and a good, strong understanding of his tactical demands, especially on the 3-5-2 that he was expecting to play in this upcoming season, especially with a particularly strong emphasis on being solid at the back and using the wings and the presence of the midfield anchors to break away to cause problems on the fast breaks. And part of the reasons for this frustration that the Japanese head coach is facing is down to certain things that were partly his doing, because something significant had happened for this season's Selangor squad. For this season's Red Giants first team, no player is above the age of 32. The oldest player currently in the Selangor first team is 31. Veterans of those age of the age group higher than 31 have either been shipped, released to join other clubs such as veteran goalkeeper Khairul Azan Khalid, or last season club captain Safwan Baharudin, who was already informed by Kinoshi that he has had no future in this season's Selangor team. The 34-year-old Singapore international has since joined the Singapore champions Lion City Sailors on loan for this season. So, because based on that decision to clear out the veterans who are above 32 or 31, I think Kinoshi did not see the value in having veterans who are experienced, who have the knowledge of the game, but probably seen as very resistant to his training methods, to what he requires, and also the mentality that he desires in this Selangor squad, and the vulnerabilities that they may possess physically and mentally while out on the pitch, even as potential impact substitutes or the odd occasion where they appear as a starting player. And that was what Kinoshi probably had in mind when he decided on the veteran clear up. That is his own doing. At the same time, he also brought in a group of young players from the Selangor 2 or under 23 second team to expose them into a first team. And as much as he led Selangor to a spate of solid results in the first half of 2025, the Japanese clearly felt that there were certain shortcomings that needed to be addressed. Hence, first, the release of the veterans over 32 and above, and secondly, I think with the inclusion of more foreign players, and more recently allowing more local born players to be included in the registered squad for the upcoming season, he felt that probably having the new foreign additions and the younger players would help Selangor to be more cohesive, to be fitter, to be sharper, to be able to withstand the physical rigors of yet another long season where they are competing both in the Malaysian domestic competitions and in the ACL too. And also the desire, as I mentioned before, the desire to want his players to be in tune with what he expects in his 3-5-2 formation, even though certain media reports which I read also included the formations that he has been tinkering with, especially in the midfield three. So, those struggles on getting his players to even perform up to his high expectations in training, in the friendly matches, or even in closed door training matches, this has probably left him publicly exasperated. It's like it gives the impression that Kinoshi felt that the Selangor players were not really obeying to what he had wanted, and he's feeling the heat, and he probably is now fearing the worst. Then you also have the rather unfortunate own goal coming inadvertently by the Selangor FC Chief Executive Officer Dr. Johan Kamal Hamidon. On 30th of July, he was quoted as saying certain things as he spoke on his the club's expectations on the Red Giants first team ahead of the new season, of which he actually said this: over the past 2 seasons, we have managed to narrow the gap with the champions Johor Darul Takzim. Therefore, I hope we can maintain this momentum, as we believe we still have a good chance of challenging for the title. Those quotes that were mentioned in the midst of those of other things he spoke about, his expectations for the record Malaysia Cup title holders, did not go down well with their rivals down south, of which the region of Johor, Tunku Ismail Ibrahim. Then you have a JDT employee and a few fans who sparked outrage, and TMJ actually responded with those words where he compared the recent season results, and especially the gap of the last 2 seasons, which actually increased, and in which I'm going to elaborate a lot further, and also I think on how Selangor have been faring ever since Johor established themselves as the undisputed powerhouses or the standard bearer of Malaysian club football. So to actually add on to what TMJ actually said, the evidence is actually on JDT's side. Ever since JDT was formed following the merger of the Johor FA and Johor FC to become the big Johor Darul Takzim Football Club umbrella under the direction of TMJ, their first season in 2013 was also the only season where JDT finished below Selangor, as Selangor finished second, ahead of JDT on goal difference, and that was the only time Selangor was last ahead of JDT or any Johor club. Ever since then, 2014, Johor JDT first, Selangor second, the gap was just 3 points. 2015, again, same top 2 positions, 7 points. Then in 2016, JDT still champions, but Selangor has slid down to 5th. 30 points gap. Yes, 30. That is more than 4 times the previous gap. So you see that the distance has increased exponentially in 2016. Then how about 2017? Almost half that gap, 16 points. But Selangor finished 6th. 2018, Selangor's worst season in recent years in the Malaysian Super League, where they finished 8th. 32 points. The biggest point gap that Selangor has had against JDT. Then 2019, half again, 16 points, as Selangor finished 3rd. 2020, which should be noted with an asterisk because due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Malaysian Super League season was only played a single leg, 1 leg. So what happened was there was only a 12-point gap in the 11 round season, where JDT finished 1st again and Selangor 5th. 2021, the same positions as 2020, 21 points. 2022, still 5th, Selangor was still 5th, 26 points. 2023, the gap was reduced as Selangor finished 2nd. I think you can say a 3 place jump from 5th to 2nd to 4th place jump actually to the gap is 15. But last season the gap was once again extended by 18 points. So, but I mentioned all these stats over the seasons ever since Johor Darul Takzim was officially formed. The closest Selangor ever touched base with Johor Darul Takzim was in the 2014 and 2015 season, where the gap was just a single digit. After that, it was a yo-yo. It was like, it was this big, then shortened again, widened again, shortened again. And what has to be noted is Johor Darul Takzim were gaining increase, they were becoming more dominant. And let's not forget this fact: Johor had been unbeaten in all domestic competitions in the 2022, 2023 and 24-25 seasons throughout all their domestic games. And when Johor was so dominant last season, where they only were held to a draw by Kuching City and defeated every other opponent, it was telling that Selangor struggled to catch up. In any other season when Selangor would have had this kind of run of results, as what happened in the first half of 2025, they would have easily finished as champions, really. But Johor had set such a high standard that it would require a equally strong response from Selangor to really narrow the gap to a single digit number, which has not happened since 2015. Yes, 10 years since then, Selangor's gap with Johor Darul Takzim has always been double digits, even in the 2020 pandemic hit season. So, TMJ, it's not just the last two seasons that Selangor had regressed. All this while, after from 2016, Johor had always had a double-digit points advantage over Selangor by the end of the standings every season. Yeah, it ranged between, if I take away 2020, which has to be remarked with an asterisk, will be between 15 points, which was achieved in the 2023 season, to 32 points, which occurred in 2018. So that gap had remained wide. Johor kept getting better and better. Selangor had to bounce back from a lowly 8th position in the Super League to recover to finish second for 2 seasons in a row. And yet they are not totally free from being the best of the rest yet. They have not fully consolidated yet. So because for Selangor's case, it's not just about trying to narrow the gap with JDT. You still have your Kuching City this season, well coached under Aidil Sharin, who already has had a good record of helping Kedah to win the Malaysia Cup or Malaysia FA Cup with limited resources. And doing the same with Kuching City, where his tactical coaching and guidance of the players saw him win the Coach of the Year ahead of the JDT head coach of 2024-25 season, Hector Bidoglio. Yes. So Kuching City would be tough to beat. Then there's Sabah, with a range of players at their disposal, including a number on loan from JDT. Sabah have been always hard to beat, even though they lost Dr. Ong Kim Swee to Indonesian club in the middle of last season. But still, they finished strong enough to stay third in the standings. Then you still have your Terengganu, who are always up for a challenge. And for this season, DPMM FC of Brunei, who are returning to Malaysian club competition for the first time since 2008, after spending the years in between in the Singapore League. And they are raring to go, and with the raft of signings they have made, not just the usual foreign signings, but also in Southeast Asia, where they had Filipino defender Amino Aguinaldo, Indonesian striker Ramadan Santana, and even a raft of Malaysians, including ex-JDT winger Shafiq Ahmad. DPMM are poised to be quite dangerous and competitive in this upcoming season. So, second place for Selangor is yet to be a given, despite bolstering the squad with new foreign signings and with a younger squad ahead of the new season. And as for Selangor's, the Red Giants struggle with the Southern Tigers. I think nothing beats further from the truth from what TMJ actually rebutted back on that 6-1 humbling that they inflicted in the Malaysia FA Cup final last year at the Bukit Jalil National Stadium. One of the most lopsided defeats in a Malaysian Cup final. That includes the Malaysia Cup and the Malaysia FA Cup. And it was a reversal of what had happened back in the 1980s when Selangor, then the powerhouses, defeated Johor by that same score in the Malaysia Cup final. So the tables have long been turned, and the rather unfortunate words from Selangor CEO only added inadvertently more burden on Kinoshi. The pressure that he had not really wanted, he doesn't really want. He wants to be a stronger Selangor, but all these pressures are coming in. And once again, we go back to Kinoshi. After talking about the unfortunate words from his superior, Dr. Hamidon. Unfortunately, Kinoshi has never fully endeared himself with the Selangor fans. In fact, getting off to the wrong footing almost less than a month after he took charge of the Red Giants. I think on 13th of December, a section of the Selangor diehard fans, the Ultra Cell, they were unhappy with the claim that Kinoshi did not want to address or talk to the fans after a league game in which they won. And as I mentioned earlier, Selangor fans are unfortunately the most demanding fans in Malaysia. Yes, Johor fans are demanding, but they are now in this rather heady period of success because of Johor Darul Takzim's dominance. But Johor will never be as demanding as that of Selangor, because Selangor, probably from generation to generation, those fans have seen the days of Mokhtar Dahari, Santokh Singh Sochin On, Dr. Ghani Minhad, or even the more recent decades of Azman Adan, K. Sambal Gamaran, Dola Saleh, Zainal Abidin Hassan, Rusdi Suparman, or even before they defected to Johor Darul Takzim, Safi Salih, Shafiq Rahim, and Amri Yahya. They were expecting themselves to be among the giants, and they always have this high expectations. And while Selangor had regressed, their fans were still hoping for the day when Selangor were kingpins again, instead of just hoping to win the annual Sultan of Selangor's Cup. They wanted to remain as kingpins again, return as kingpins again, but the reality is white. The expectation is Selangor to really narrow down to just a few points and defeat Johor Darul Takzim at last after a long while. But the reality is, this Selangor's first team squad looked very disjointed, and they do not look ready for the upcoming season, as what Kinoshi has admitted. And because of the wrong impression that Kinoshi gave to a section of Selangor fans, when the going gets tough, Kinoshi is not going to get the backing of these fans, who may instead want the Japanese head and Kinoshi may not even survive to see a full year out with the Red Giants if the fans really get angry as the first month of the season goes on here. So they not only want to win, but also win in style, deliver the trophies. But it has been a painful process for the Selangor fans, and for some reason Kinoshi has not had them on his side from the start. So it's a major disadvantage, especially in the moments like this where he probably needed the Selangor fans to be behind him, to give him the full confidence the way the Selangor FC Technical Committee has already publicly aired their views on their confidence in his coaching and technical abilities. And to make things interesting and compounding matters, veteran French coach Christophe Gamel, who he was recently appointed as the new head coach of Selangor 2 or the under 23 squad and has only been in the job for less than a month. And yet within that period, he actually guided a small squad of Selangor 2 players to finish runners-up in the recent Soccer 7 series where they actually suffered back-to-back defeats to Vasco da Gama in the main men's open quarterfinals and subsequently a narrow loss to Shanghai Shenhua's second squad in the men's shoes semi-finals just last week 2 weeks ago in Singapore, close to 2 weeks ago. And Selangor had actually impressed with their tenacity and their willingness to be adventurous while going forward, and with the freedom to express themselves, even though Gamel had also expressed a little bit of that frustration on how having the sevens had actually sort of disrupted his team's preparation ahead of their own domestic commitments for the new season. But in spite of all this, in spite of Gamel's insistence that he's here to lead the Selangor 2 side for the upcoming campaign, the French veteran actually has had extensive experience in Southeast Asia, having been assistant to Philippe Troussier in the Vietnam national team a couple of years ago, and also being an assistant coach with A-League men's side MacArthur until the end of the 2024-25 A-League men's season. And with that, and he has also even coached Sri Pahang in the 2022 Malaysian Super League campaign. So he has some familiarity with the game in Southeast Asia and crucially in Malaysia. And he signed, I suspect, not merely just to develop a group of young players to be ready for first team action for Kinoshi to choose from, but perhaps to be ready to step in should Kinoshi falter badly in this month's competitive fixtures, which actually include the following: the opening game on 8th of August against Johor Darul Takzim, which also acts as the match for the Piala Subansik. Then they also have a key game against DPMM FC on their second game of the season, first home match in Petaling Jaya on the 12th of August. And this was also followed by a very interesting encounter where they're up against Thai champions Buriram United in the first group match of the ASEAN Club Championship Shopee Cup, on 20th of August away. And then you got Terengganu coming up on the 27th of August. And all these matches could be big banana slips for the Red Giants if they continue to underperform in training and underperform on the pitch in competitive games, as what Kinoshi is publicly fearing right now, as he stated out bluntly to the media on that. And in that same report that I mentioned earlier, the last thing Kinoshi actually wanted was a game against the Singapore selection in September's Sultan of Selangor's Cup on the 27th of September, which will be held at the Merdeka Stadium. That fixture was something he did not want, and he had publicly sort of stated it, even though he respected the organizer's choice. But there is a chance that Kinoshi may not even make it as far as mid-September if the first month is disastrous. And there are these 4 banana skin matches that could determine the rest of the Red Giants campaign in the 25-26 season. And if Kinoshi falters badly through to the ACL2 matches, the Selangor fans will grow very impatient, and they may end up demanding for the removal of their unpopular coach, which is a pity because the results have been strongly in Kinoshi's favor. The achievements that Kinoshi has managed to conjure in such a short space of time has allowed him to continue for this season with an extensive pre-season campaign and preparation. But yet, he has also now admitted that the players who are now 31 years and younger are falling short of his expectations in training and in matches, which is not a good sign. Selangor fans should be very alarmed. Faizal Halim and company may not deliver, and that is in spite of at least 2 World Cup bound players in the squad and a couple of exciting new foreign players in their roster. So, all said, Kinoshi is now literally walking on a tightrope, and that is before a ball is kicked off in fury on the 8th of August at Sultan Ibrahim Stadium. If Kinoshi manages to get Selangor through safely with at least a few draws in those banana skin games, although I'm not expecting much against Johor or Buriram. These two are way ahead, streets ahead of Selangor in terms of playing ability and the depth of their imports and their tactical selection and their setup. But if they can survive DPMM and Terengganu in their league games, in addition to their FA Cup games where they are expected to comfortably coast the first leg against the second tier Malaysian University, then at least Kinoshi will be given more time to steady the ship and be able to make more improvements as the season goes on. But if those 4 banana skin matches produce all defeats, then Kinoshi's position will be more precarious leading into September. And who knows, by then Kinoshi may end up being the first managerial casualty of the 2025-26 Malaysian League season. And that is quite a dramatic fall from grace from the results that he has conjured. The only thing Kinoshi has right now is his ability to create results in competitive matches, but can he do it with a younger squad that he has placed by design age-wise, but yet at times feels like he has not gathered the confidence of many of these players to do likewise as what he demands. I think this is going to be a very interesting month ahead for the veteran Japanese coach, where this is his first full season in charge, and whether he's able to bring the best out of those players that he has gathered at his disposal for the upcoming season. And Tanya will be tracking it with keen interest.